All right, let's talk Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team obviously coming off of a massive victory over a team that many people thought was the best team in the AFC, the Indianapolis Colts. Things are trending in the direction for Pittsburgh. But on top of that, they're making really smart moves, not getting a lot of media attention, but I think it's really critical for the Steelers going forward. We'll break down that latest there. But first, I'm Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, so going into last Sunday, the Steelers, losers of a couple, fall to the Bengals, fall to the Packers. What's going on? Playing the Indianapolis Colts, who are looking really, really good. Then suddenly Pittsburgh handles business. They dominate throughout. Now they're emerging again as one of the top contenders in the AFC. They've got some flaws, but every team does. There's not a team in the AFC right now that you don't look at and say, yeah, they got some serious issues. And the Steelers, look, they're not perfect, but they're set up very nicely for the second half of the 2025 season. And as the trade deadline came and went, there's a lot of scuttlebutt about what the Steelers would or wouldn't do. But now that we've done some reporting after the fact, it's clear the Steelers made a really smart move that's not getting a lot of attention. Let's dive into our first article here. We've got a bunch of different pieces here. And when we combine it all together, it's very clear what the Steelers are trying to do. So this first report is a screenshot from The Athletic talking about the Steelers deciding not to go after a wide receiver. Obviously, Jakobi Meyers was a name they had been linked to, and the Jacksonville Jaguars acquired Meyers for a 4th and a 6th round pick. We talked about it yesterday about how the Raiders got a lot more value than they realistically should have for a guy of Meyers' talents and contract situation. So the Raiders got a steal, whereas the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't really get a good value there. They overpaid. The Steelers decided to hold on to their draft capital, and here's why. Again, courtesy of The Athletic, the Steelers have been stockpiling draft picks knowing that the 2026 and 2027 quarterback classes are expected to be loaded with talent. Pittsburgh is currently projected to have between 8 and 12 draft picks in next year's draft, depending on if it gets its full allotment of 4 compensatory picks. After Tuesday, the Steelers have their full complement of picks, plus a 3rd-round pick from the George Pickens trade, and as many as 4 additional comp picks. And that way, a quiet Tuesday in early November could lead to an eventful draft day in Pittsburgh in 2026. I think this is part of what the Steelers' plan has been and what it is. And we talked about this during the offseason, right before this training camp, actually, where the Pittsburgh Steelers clearly were setting themselves up with Aaron Rodgers to try and chase a title in 2025 and then recalibrate and rebuild the total roster construction in terms of their salary cap structure and their potential draft capital for 2027. And that's exactly what they're doing here. They're executing on that plan, right? And it only works if you keep your assets. If it only works if you keep all the pieces you've accumulated to set yourself up for a big move. The only question the Steelers are going to have to answer after this season, assuming Aaron Rodgers retires, which in all likelihood he will be, is Will Howard the guy, or do you, Pittsburgh, want to go big at quarterback in 26 or 27? That's the only question, because right now they've got assets for days. They can move up and down the draft pretty much at will. They are set up nicely. They're one of the few teams. If you look at the teams right now that are looking at quarterback, you look at the Saints, salary cap hell. Miami Dolphins, salary cap hell. New York Jets, feeling a little bit better about themselves because of all the trades, but they've got no good players. Right? The Jets have nobody left on their team. They traded away all their good players except for maybe Garrett Wilson, right? So the Jets are kind of like they're literally a tanking team right now. It's remarkable to watch. So the Steelers, of all the teams that could be potentially targeting a quarterback, are going to be in the strongest position. They got the most cap flexibility in a lot of ways. Obviously, they've got a few older players and got some question marks there. But in terms of teams that are actually actively looking for quarterback help, the Steelers are in a strong spot, whether to make a move in 2026 or potentially, and I actually kind of like this, trading back in 2026, getting even more assets, evaluate Will Howard, and then potentially go monster in 2027. The Steelers have a lot of flexibility, and they set themselves up very nicely by not overpaying for a guy like Jakobi Meyers. But that's the future, right? Let's talk about right now, the here and now. Let's open up our next graphic right here, and I want to look at something that I think is very interesting. And it's looking at the personnel usage of 13 personnel. And this is 1 back, 3 tight ends, 1 running back, 3 tight ends. And you can see right here, the Pittsburgh Steelers used 13 personnel at a 16% rate, 15.96, as you can see on that chart. That's the highest in the National Football League. But one of the things that's so interesting is that if you look at the chart, these are the teams that use 13 personnel the most. It's a lot of really smart teams. It's a lot of really good offenses. The Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay, smart team, really good offense. The Indianapolis Colts, obviously good team, really good offense. Arizona Cardinals don't get a lot of credit, but they're a good football team, a feisty football team. They're 3-5, but they've lost 5 games by a total of like 12 points, right? They could easily be 7-1, right? It's one of those weird seasons for Arizona. And you look at the Baltimore Ravens, good offensive football team. The Patriots and Lions rounding out the list there. Again, two teams that are playing really good offensive football. So 13 personnel using that three tight end package is currently the way to create success in the National Football League. It's kind of been a weird year for that. But basically what has happened is that teams are coming out in 2 and 3 in tight end packages and defenses are reacting to it and it's opening up passing lanes. In fact, let's go into our next post here, courtesy of Greg Olson, who again is a Fox Sports analyst who highlighted this specifically. And he writes Seattle, and he's talking about the Seahawks here specifically, but it applies to the Steelers, I believe. Seattle's a top passing offense in 2025, drastically different from 2024. Darnold, JSN, and Kubiak have been excellent. Here's the most important part. Defenses who continue to stack the box to stop misguided, and Seattle is taking advantage. Like I said last night, they're a heavy personnel passing offense, and that's been the key to their success. And that's where the Steelers come in. The Steelers are starting to realize that they can use heavy personnel to be a part of their passing attack, like the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that's one of the main reasons why they weren't willing to pay a lot for a wide receiver. And it is a great move. It is a smart move, undeniably so. I give Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, the entire Steelers organization a lot of kudos for recognizing it because we've talked about this on this channel all the time. And I'm kind of mad at myself for not thinking about it over the past few weeks with the trade rumors. The Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Rams, all these teams using 2 and 3 tight end personnel packages, they are crushing it offensively, passing out of those packages. Meanwhile, we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers here and like, man, how are they going to throw the football right with only one wide receiver, maybe only two wide receivers? And that's all they need, guys, with that 12, 13 personnel. They only need one or two. That's it. In a weird way, the Pittsburgh Steelers, in just a funky stroke of luck, have somehow stumbled into the perfect personnel package. And listen, it wasn't an accident. There was some intentionality there. But the reality is, the Seattle Seahawks created this by design. The Rams 100% created by design. The Steelers, they might not have, hard to really know for certain, but they're here and they've got the perfect personnel package to dominate passing the football the second half of the season. In a weird way, they don't need a trade for a receiver because they've got all they need. It doesn't sound like a lot, but again, doesn't sound like a lot, excuse me. But again, that's what works today in the National Football League. These 12, 13 personnel packages and throwing out of it because defenses right now, and it's to a man, every single team, they see 12, 13 personnel, they go, okay, heavy run defense, stack the box. They lose all responsibility in the pass game. It opens up massive seams. The Rams are crushing because of it. The Seahawks are crushing because of it. And now the Pittsburgh Steelers are perfectly situated to capitalize on that exact same movement. It's one of those things where it's so rare where a move, a decision to not make a trade is good both for the short term, obviously setting up your offense to continue to use that 12, 13 personnel packaging, primarily 13 personnel in some of those situations, while also allowing you to have long-term success as well, talking about keeping those draft picks, keeping that capital so you can make a big move in 26 and or 27. The Pittsburgh Steelers deserve a lot of credit. A lot of people were saying they need to trade a receiver. They need to go after a receiver. And look, I'm going to be totally, I said the Steelers need to go get a receiver. I said that. I've said that like 5 times. I was wrong. The Pittsburgh Steelers right now are perfectly situated with their receiving core. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of Pittsburgh fans, but when you look at the data and you look at the trend of the National Football League right now, their heavy tight end packages is exactly what wins. They hold on to those picks. They hold on to that capital. It will set them up perfectly for the future when Aaron Rodgers retires. Guys, this Steelers team, I know there's a lot of consternation about how good are they, what's the rest of the year going to look like, what's the future going to hold, but where they sit today coming out of the trade deadline, it's clear they made a smart move by not falling victim to what people like me were asking for. Credit to the Steelers for making a great decision here. I think it's going to be huge for them going forward. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Steelers fans, in the comment section below, big game. Big game this weekend. Fun game this weekend at Los Angeles against the Chargers. Give us your prediction. How do you think this game's going to go? I think it's going to be kind of an interesting battle when Pittsburgh and LA play. It always seems to be a very physical, obviously contested football game. And I think this upcoming weekend will be no different. So give us your prediction, final score, Steelers, Chargers. Put it in the comment section below. But let's go over to you now. What are your thoughts on all things Pittsburgh?
Yeah, like I think this for Pittsburgh very interesting as far as what they have gone into, and it stems back to earlier this offseason with the moves they decided to make with letting a guy like George Pickens walk, go trade him away as well. I think it's a very interesting move because it's almost like the Steelers have been seeing this, setting this up, saying, hey, let's, like you said, bank the capital. Let's move off of players and utilize what we got. We think, we have a strong 3 tight end set. Let's utilize more of that. And like I said, they've kind of fallen into what has been the hot thing right now in the NFL is to go 3 tight end sets. Steelers being able to do it more than anybody else. So I think this is a really smart move by this organization. And if you ask any Steelers fan, I think everybody has said this is the year, I don't know if it will be or not, but the word around town is the draft is in Pittsburgh. This is going to be the year. They've been stockpiling the picks to go after some quarterback. That is why they haven't done it in the past. Recently, they're using Aaron Rodgers as their, stopgap as far as longevity. He's doing a really good job so far, but stopgap for longevity. And they're going to come after this year and be able to pick themselves up a quarterback in Pittsburgh. And what a year that would be. Have the draft in Pittsburgh, all the buzz around this team. They come into the draft, use all of this stockpile draft capital that they built up, and then go out and get a quarterback. That would be a fantastic storyline for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So personally, selfishly, I hope it happens because I think it would be a pretty cool line for them. But we all know, just nonetheless, they have a lot of options going forward. And when you make moves, when you do things, let players walk, getting those comp picks, trade players to get draft capital, don't trade players to save your draft capital, and you're still able to do well. That's a really well thought out, a really well, put together team they have here. I think that's exactly what we have in Pittsburgh now. A team that is strong. It is winning games against good teams like we saw against Indianapolis Colts. Come in this weekend versus the Chargers. I think this is a team that can win. They're looking really great on paper. And I'm excited to see what they do with all of this saved draft capital.
Yeah, and one of the things when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers in this situation is that they've done a great job with that dual mandate, right? That people aren't talking about because right now everyone's so focused on obviously being in the thick of the season. All right, what are you doing right now? And a lot of people, they're losing sight of 2026, 2027 because teams, you got to be focused on both the short term and the medium and long term because if you lose sight of one without focus on the other, you get yourself in a bad position very quickly. But speaking of bad positions, obviously, like I mentioned before, big game this weekend. Let's pull up what the predictions are currently looking like per the analytics. So we'll go up on this graphic on the screen. You've got the matchup predictor. Again, this is per ESPN's analytics. They have the Los Angeles Chargers with a 62.9% chance to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a 36.8% chance to win. Obviously, small percent chance the game could end in a tie. We have seen a tie this season, so we know for certain it is in fact possible. When you look at the odds right now, the Los Angeles Chargers are a 2.5-point favorite. They opened up at a 3.5-point favorite. Money line has them at minus 45, an implied probably of about 59%. So basically, when you look at the odds makers and you look at the analytics, they say 60-40 Chargers, which is pretty darn close, right? Chargers are obviously the home team. So that kind of tilts it to the LA Chargers right there, which basically what everyone's saying right here is this is a toss-up, right? Chargers have the tie because they have home field advantage. I don't think the Chargers have the advantage here. And listen, I like the Chargers. I like Harbaugh. I like Justin Herbert. I think their issues at tackle with the injuries. They play a team in Pittsburgh that's perfectly situated to handle it, not just because the Steelers are great at edge rusher and the defenders on the edge, but also because the Steelers have good interior defensive linemen. Hayward, Y.A. Black, Benton's just had his best game of his career, probably. Of course, Derek Carman, the first rounder. So the Los Angeles Chargers, who are not good on the interior anyway, are going to have to focus really hard to protect the inside, which means it's going to be nothing but one-on-one matchups for guys like T.J. Watt, Jack Sawyer. Just did a film review on him. He's emerging as a guy. Expect him to step up with some opportunities this upcoming weekend as well. And listen, the Chargers defense is good, so I'm not expecting this to be a 34-10 victory for Pittsburgh. Not at all. It's going to be close. It's going to be a dogfight, but I trust the Steelers and the way they're playing, the physicality they're showing, their overall mindset, especially defensively, to show up in a big way. I think they beat Los Angeles. I think it feels like a 20-17, 24-17 kind of game. It's going to be an ugly game, like any Pittsburgh Steelers game usually tends to be this time of year, even though it's not in Pittsburgh, right? It's going to be, kind of physical, nasty, grinded out. Probably not a lot of punting, probably a lot of long drives and into some field goals and some key fourth down stops and a takeaway here or there. But I think Pittsburgh comes out on top, guys. I think this team, after losing back-to-back games, feeling the spiral, feeling the pressure, and they come out against Indianapolis and deliver a dominant performance. I love the mental toughness. I love the matchup this weekend. I think Pittsburgh wins this one in a just dogfight, but a big win for the Steelers over Los Angeles.